Hey everybody, I am going to get to sharing a screen here because this will help me give you a bit more detail about exactly what we're talking about today. We are talking about the GP magnet. Now, if you've been following the work in the group, you'll have seen that earlier in the week you would have been offered the opportunity to download a workbook, and that's called GP Magnet. So I just want to talk to you a little bit about this critical skill set that all owners need to master. The reality is, if you decided that you were going to go out and set up a practice, a clinic, whatever you want to call that space that you actually work in, and your name is on for the lease or finance for the building, the reality is you're going to need to develop a few crucial skill sets, but one of them is most definitely going to be recruiting other GPs on board. If you can't do that, you know, in the ascension model, the pyramid model, the base layer is the nightmare job. That's the layer where you're doing all the work. When you do the math, and I did this once, it's pretty scary. What I found was that I think it was about 3 o'clock on Thursday afternoon that all of the money that was billed after that time was the money that actually was mine to keep. That up until Thursday, mid-afternoon, everybody else got paid, staff, building, you name it. And so, you know, if in your head you think it's really tiring, I might have Fridays off, bad luck. Friday is the only day that you actually get paid. So the reality is that if you don't become proficient at recruiting other GPs, you're going to end up getting cooked alive, and you'll remain on that nightmare job layer. And the problem is that, you know, the layers of that are the nightmare job, the well-paid job, the real business, and then the asset layer right at the top. It's about 10 years in most cases to ascend those layers. And it's not a linear progression. So you don't sort of just go steadwise up the ladder. What happens at times is people get knocked down for a variety of reasons. And at the moment, you know, it's a really difficult time for recruiting GPs, just full stop, let alone staff. Actually, it's difficult recruiting staff because a couple of reasons. The first reason is people are pretty knackered. You know, at the moment, they are quite reasonably tired from the COVID pandemic, where a lot of extra work and repetitive and boring work has been pushed down to general practice. And so people are pretty fatigued. The second thing is that the lack of international migration has put the market for overseas trained doctors, brought it to a screaming halt. And that's even on top of the federal government making an intentional decision to throttle back on those numbers, believe it or not, so they could save money on the MBS. Go back and have a look at the budget forecast 2 years ago, and you'll see that this market is becoming increasingly tough. The question here is, what are these skills worth to you? Well, what I would suggest to you is they are worth a hell of a lot, because if you were to go and pay recruiters to go and get your doctors, and that's a valid approach to getting you know, recruiting doctors in. But if you're going to go and pay recruiters, then you're probably paying between $18,000 to $25,000 per GP. And I'm going to say it's not the money that's the problem. What happens is that they are creating a marketplace, and they are putting you up against other offers. And what are the things that you think that they really go by? What are the things that you think people make decisions based on? They're probably not the things that are going to be the right ones for you to be choosing your doctors by, your future doctors. So the reality here is, if you're going to outsource recruiting, that's fine, but you're going to need to make sure that you use some of the strategies I give you here in order to give the right brief so that you get the right doctors and the right activity in the top of the funnel. One really cool thing here, two brief stories before we kick off. We had 2 of our members in Project X that have done exceptionally well by following not just the process in GP Magnet, but we have probably 6 to 8 pieces of content all around recruitment, because it's such a big need. In one case, a doctor that owns a practice in a town of around about 200,000 people has a higher than normal GP service fee. So it was 40% service fee, so the retention's at 60%, and was having difficulty recruiting and was just not sure. And so surveyed the marketplace, had a chat to a few colleagues and friends. The feedback that came back was that people perceived you needed to have a non-GP specialist partner in order to work at this practice. And that was the position that the practice occupied in most people's minds, because there hadn't been any work done by this owner to kind of rectify that misconception, if you like. And, you know, you look at anything else in life, there's always a spectrum of value. You know, if you go down to the car dealership, they don't sell one car at one price point, but, you know, doctors often get obsessed about a certain price point when it comes to GP retention. Anyway, what this doctor did was they could have done two things, actually. They could have just said, well, we'll meet the market, we'll meet expectations, we'll adjust our service fee, or we'll go hard at demonstrating how we deliver value rather than focusing on price. That's the pathway they went down. In the 12 months after they made that decision and followed the processes in here, they were able to recruit 4 full-time equivalent GPs. The service fee retention of that, so the value that created for this person's business, is $500,000 ongoing. So not just now, this year and every year, provided those doctors stick around, and they will stick around because it's an awesome practice. And this person went deep on how awesome it is and started telling that story. The second story I want to talk about is a rural location where, using these and other strategies in Project X, this person has been able to recruit, and this is one of the best business development managers, you know, in a multi-practice GP business that you'll ever come across. She has managed to nail 7 GP recruits in the coming 6 months, which is just phenomenal in an area where this has traditionally been difficult to do. And they've done that by using some of these particular strategies that we're going to go through here. So this is really important. And what we need to do here is we need to really get to a place where we unpack our genius. What is it that we do really well? And if you think everything, you're kidding yourself. You need to focus on just a few things that you can particularly nail. And this is like that person I talked about that had the higher retention. One of the things they did particularly well was having a beautiful in-house information system. So is that, you know, an intranet or whatever you'd like to call it, where everything was laid out beautifully and there was always an answer for everything, just so they elevated consistency and performance. I think in business, you have 2 jobs. Your first job is to elevate the performance of your business, you know, to create better value for who it is you serve, in our case, patients, and in this case, doctors, because the doctor is the customer in this type of relationship. So we need to elevate the performance. But the second thing we need to do is probably harder than that, and that is narrowing the gap between our best and worst. That's the most important thing that we actually need to be doing. That is much, much harder. And if you're a fan of a sporting team, I won't pick a code because I'll probably offend someone. But if you have a favorite sporting team, I will wager that the biggest frustration you have is when they are wildly different in their performance. And as teams get better, the teams that generally win the flag don't have a great deal of variability in their output. Their best and worst games are not that far apart because they know how to string everything together. They have a really good focus on consistency. So you need to find your genius, and we'll go through some ways to unpack that in a moment. You need to make sure that you increase your capacity. You know, at the end of the day, a general practice is a marketplace. And what we are attempting to do is to bring together patients and to bring together doctors in that marketplace. Now, if you go and have a look at, you know, any shopping center these days, they do this really well. What they do is they set the place up to have like neighborhoods within the shopping center. So, you know, if you want to go and get sporting apparel, you'll find that all the sporting shops are together. You know, back in the day, there used to be whoever bid the most for the space would get it. And so it would be a little bit chaotic about where everything was. But at the moment, if you go to any decent shopping center, you'll see that there are kind of neighborhoods or cohorting. And basically what you'll see is that the type of people who like the stuff that's in that one particular area, you know, there'll be a coffee shop that also suits them, and there'll be a food outlet that also suits them. So the idea is that they're focused in on their avatars, and we do a fair bit of work with our members on unpacking the avatars. Who are the patients you serve? What do they like? And who are the doctors you serve? What do they like? And bringing them together in the marketplace is the trick. And so you can increase capacity using strategies other than recruiting GPs. So the question is, Do you need to increase capacity yet, or can you do something to get more out of the capacity that you already have? In most cases, we see that people have practices where there is a lot of latent capacity laying around, and there are a lot of latent opportunities in the existing practice. So ideally here, before we scale and recruit, we just want to be maximizing what we're already doing, because otherwise, essentially what we're doing is scaling up something that's already poorly performing, and you're just going to be scaling junk, and you don't really want to be doing that. That's not going to help anybody. You've got to be okay with there being no sacred cows. Some work you do will be very, very low value work, or work that is, it might be work that is, spiritually taxing perhaps. So, general practice can be task heavy, it can be spirit heavy, and it can be decision dense. So, you might choose some activities to let go of. Essentially, if you're going to move up a value chain, so if you're going to find that you go from low value to high value, then you're going to need to actually let go of some of that low value stuff. That's going to be different for all of us. But if you don't let go of the low value stuff, then you always have to find somebody willing and prepared to do it. Either that, or you can redesign the low value work so that it is no longer low value work. But you do need to think about this, because the time when GPs were kind of jack of all trades, literally doing all things, has probably passed. Now, that might be a controversial thing to say, but I think you need to be really clear about what you do and what you don't do. And that means who you're for and who you're not for. And you don't literally say to people, we're not for people like you in most cases, but you should sprinkle that through all of the communications that you have with your community, just so that people know what to expect when they go to your practice. It makes sense. If you're not for people, they can go somewhere where they are welcome. And again, this might be a bit controversial, but I think plugging people patients back into the right clinics, if it's not yours, is a great service to everybody involved. If you're not the right place for them and they're not the right person for you, then put them into an environment where that does suit them. And that might mean that you start doing a few referrals to people in your local area. I strongly recommend that. Any good business in any sphere just has good referrals that operate between different entities. That makes a lot of sense. Find something that's a point of difference. At the moment, you could literally be the anywhere GP. You could create the environment for an anywhere GP. This is something that we did in our practice because we had some doctors that had special circumstances through the pandemic where being in the clinic wasn't appropriate for them. And so, it may be that you can create a profile or a point of difference that sets you apart from many, just because it's part of your genius zone, and you extend that out and think, okay, if I was able to build this out, who might this appeal to? This needs to tie into your target avatar. What is it about your environment that your target avatar, your ideal future GP, needs to know and believe about your environment that will help them to know that it's the right place to work? We know this, but GPs aren't sitting at home watching Oprah or whatever it is that's on during the daytime. They're generally working somewhere else. So they have to be a bit frustrated or suffering some pain in the environment where they are. And that's an important lesson for you as an owner, because if you are causing the people in your practice pain, then they are looking to leave. And that's where we'll get to covering off on why it's important to make sure that piece works first. And you need to be, and this is something that it's really interesting. We as doctors, most of us as privately held clinic owners are clinicians. Sort of 8, 9 out of 10 of us are clinicians. But even to those of us that are not, we're pretty conservative. We don't usually get up and blow our own horn. We don't usually get up and tell much in the way of stories about ourselves, because we're uncomfortable doing that. And also there's a lot of regulatory frameworks that might intimidate us into thinking that that's not legitimate anyway. But you do need to talk about what it is that you do well, and the backstory to that, why it is that is important to you. If you don't tell people, they're just not going to know. I had a good chat with a mate of mine. He's an orthopedic surgeon. And during the first lockdown in Melbourne, their business contracted dramatically, and we're having a conversation around what he might be able to do to maintain contact with, again, two referral bases, really. One was patients, so he needed to maintain some kind of form of communication with patients. The other thing he needed to do was maintain communication with his ideal referring doctors, so he knew who those GPs were, or he had a fair idea of who they were, but because of the fact that the surgery was locked out, there wasn't much that they could do. Anyway, we got to chatting a bit about his presence on social media, which was zero, and he was frustrated. This doctor is a good mate of mine, been a mate for a long time, one of the first arthroscopic surgeons in Australia, so internationally traveled, did all of the work overseas. So he's done more of this work than most. And he was frustrated that people on social media that were much more junior than he were talking about this. And his words were something to the effect of as if they were the experts. And he was describing that the work that they were doing, that they were promoting, was shameful, that it was not ethical or appropriate. And I said to him, okay, what are you doing about it? He said nothing. So, okay, well, do you want to do something about it? Do you want to address it? And he said, look, I'm probably not comfortable doing it. I said, okay, well, why is that? He said, well, I wouldn't be that comfortable. It was a really good moment of honesty. If one of my colleagues or friends saw the video, I said, why would that matter? Why would it matter if somebody else saw it? He said, well, the problem is that I would feel as if I was being judged by them. So we know that if they've got enough time to be watching videos of you, you're taking them off their game anyway. But it is a good reminder that all of us need to have clear messaging about what it is we do well, why people should be seeing us, and sprinkling some of who we're for and who we're not for in that messaging. That's going to be really, really important. And then we need to be making sure that we're getting our funnel working. So one of the biggest problems with recruiting GPs is people think that this is a linear progression. That we meet a person through, maybe it's an event. The old days when you used to go out to dinner with people before you're doing everything on Zoom, and then you have a chat to them, and then there's this kind of conversation that goes on over 3, 6, 12 months. That's actually not how it is. Recruiting is a marketing funnel. So recruiting is a funnel. At the top of the funnel is all of your activity, organic and paid through different platforms. And again, the purpose of today is not to cover off on all of that, but you put organic and paid content at the top. Just make sure that all of that organic and paid content is sprinkled with who you're for and who you're not for. You need to know your audience. You need to know your avatars. You need to make sure that you sprinkle some case studies in there. And we use something called a 10-minute talk framework that we've built internally, just to unpack some of the feelings of the GPs that are part of your team. And then make sure that you have appropriate links in the ads. And you can do this with Bitly or Rebrandly, to make sure that you know where the leads come from. You need to be able to measure the performance of your funnel, because what you want to find out is which platforms are working, organic and paid, particularly paid. But organic, it might be easy to think, well, it's free, it doesn't matter. You want to know, where are you putting your time? Is it worthwhile reinvesting time in platforms that aren't generating a return? And you need to experiment with ad copy. One of the sessions we do, I've talked about a study that they did in San Fran, where they had they split a ceramics class in half, adult ceramics class, and they said to the ceramics, they said to each half, the first half was, you've got to spend a week on building a single awesome piece of pottery, I guess. I'm not a ceramicist. And the other group, they said, you're going to be judged on volume. So we're going to weigh your work at the end. And then at the end of the week, they had an expert judge, and I assume these people exist, an expert judge for the ceramics. The question is, where did the best pieces of work come from? The answer is the high volume group, because volume, the way you get to better is by doing. by volume. And so when we ran this session in Project X, at the end of it, we were having a conversation, and I was just getting a bit of a sense of where people were at with recruiting. And one of our members said, "Oh, I'm in the pre-recruiting stage." And I said, "Tell me more about that. What does that mean?" And they said, "Well, we haven't done anything yet." And so, "Well, have you got a video platform?" Gave them a suggestion for a video platform. And I said, "Okay, well, are you up for a challenge?" And she said, "Well, yeah, I guess so." So, "Okay, we'll download this because it's not going to take you long to download this app. And then what I want you to do is to get your first video out today." That is exactly what they did. They started because they start with action, and you need to do some dirty reps. If you're going to get good at this, you just need to get over yourself, get out there, get some ad copy out, because the truth is you don't know what's going to resonate with the audience. You don't know. You do need to become more proficient at knowing though. And the only way you're going to know is by getting it out there. And you're going to need to become proficient at copywriting. You probably can't outsource this. If you are selling the benefits and not the features, then you look like every other ad. If you want to see how not to write an ad, then go to Recruit GP or something like that. Have a read of it, and it would be like reading ads for cars that say, "Hey, come and buy my car. It has 4 wheels, it has anti-lock brakes, power windows, windscreen, windows on the side. It's really cool. Come and take it for a drive." You need to write some ad copy that's engaging and stands out from the rest. And again, that's beyond the scope of what we're talking about today. I'm going to walk you through the actual workbook itself, just so you get a bit of an idea about the intent of using this. This first bit, I'm not going to cover in a great deal of detail here, but this is all about improving capacity in what we do. And so the example I would use here is the difference between Little League and elite sport is not much of what happens in here. In the middle bit, during the consult, the thing that happens in most cases, if we take it back to sport, my pen's not quite working. If we take it back to the sporting endeavour, as I said, in Little League or elite sport, when they're out there on the field, they're giving it their best. And so, the effort is close enough to 100%, and they're all showing up. The difference between the elite and the amateur kids team is what they do before and after the game. And general practice is the same. Most doctors do the consult part pretty well, because when the patient's in front of them, they're attending to the patient's needs. The bit that will elevate your performance and improve your consistency, so improve performance, narrow the gap between the best and worst, is the stuff you do in the pre-consult and the post-consult. That's a really important concept. Again, not one that I want to build out in more detail here today, but I want you to have a little bit of a think about what are all of the elements in these areas that you can get out, so you can look at honing and refining what it is. If you can find 2 minutes in every consult that you can gain in efficiency over the course of a day, you're probably talking about recouping an hour of your time, or it might be that you can add 2 minutes of value in the same time. Either way, you're making a big impact. So this is worthwhile honing and refining along the way. The next one here is around what we can do to get the capacity match right. So we want to ideally match supply and demand. And now we know that supply and demand are seasonal things. And so this is not an easy thing to do. It's a dynamic demand and it's a dynamic supply. So we've got to do our best to actually make sure that we can get this right. But you do need to unpack what it is that you can do to manage demand and what it is that you can do to increase your capacity. Now, at the moment, managing patient demand is going to be really important for you, because most likely you have troubles with high call volumes and a lot of questions around COVID vaccines. So there are some systems and processes you can use to address that. And then there are also ways that we touched on that you can increase your capacity. And there might be other things you can do that are thinking out of left field, other ways of addressing supply and demand mismatches. Things like express clinics and so forth. There are quite a few things that you can do there. The next, attract, convert, and retain. So this is top of funnel. So attract is about getting enough eyeballs on the ads that you're running that speak to the GP avatars that you're trying to recruit, because you know your patient avatars so well. So the first thing is build an audience that have eyeballs that are looking at you. Convert is basically that when you do get people interested and they're thinking, I'm not that happy with where I am, or I might be happy, but that actually looks better. You might like your car, but you still might like to get a new upgrade. And so if your opportunity looks like an upgrade over where people currently are, and I strongly suggest you should have upgrades to the things other than your GP retention. You need to run a viable business. Do not be ashamed about that. Then the next piece is that we want to be able to convert people. So once you've built the audience of people that are looking at your ad copy, you want to be able to find the people that say, yeah, I'm ready now. I would like to hear more. Pick me. Now, if you don't have a good process for moving quickly on that person, you are going to lose them every time. And then my question to you is, how many times do you need to have contact with people in most cases for them to know, like, and trust you enough to be able to take things to the next step, which means join you? How many times do you think that is? Well, I'll tell you, normal sales theory says that there is 8 to 12 points of contact most of the time in order for people to feel as if they are comfortable enough to be able to commit to your practice. And you're going to need to include in this negotiation risk reversal strategies, so as that it is clear that these people are not taking a huge risk, an asymmetrical risk in joining you. That's really, really important. When do you reckon most people give up, by the way, in this range, 8 to 12 points of contact? I'll tell you when I reckon most people give up. 2 to 3. And so you're probably leaving a large amount of conversions on the table. Something like 80% of conversions occur beyond 7 points of contact. So if you're only having 2 or 3 points of contact, that's probably not enough. You need to think a lot about that. And then once you get them in, you need to make sure they stick. There's not much point, and I want you to work through your retention strategies here in this worksheet. There's not much point recruiting people, and it's like trying to fill a bucket up where you're drilling holes in the bottom of it. You need to make sure that your existing crew are staying, and if there's a problem with retention in your clinic, the place to start is with retaining the right GPs. It's okay if you're clearing out the driftwood. I was going to say the dead wood. That's probably a bit harsh. But if you're clearing shop, that's fine, because once you start to focus a bit more on your values, on who you're for and who you're not for, you might actually decide that, you know what, I've taken a few people here that the main reason I took them was because they had a medical degree and they had a pulse. And if that's your criteria for recruiting GPs, you're going to need to reboot, because the odds are you're probably running an adult daycare, and you most likely have a bunch of babies around you. I want you to get out in this workshop all the things in this worksheet, all the things you can think of that are under attract, convert, and retain that are important for you. So do a ton of work on that. Otherwise, what I'd like to offer you here is 2 things. If you've watched this on Facebook, then please drop help if you'd like help with this. If you're happy to go it alone, that's cool. But if you do think you'd like help, if you want to move more quickly, make less mistakes, and elevate the performance of your privately held general practice, then drop help, and I will have a bit of a chat to you. I'll just drop you a message. If you're watching this outside of Facebook, you'll notice that on the workbook download page, there's an opportunity to book a call. And if you'd like to book a call, then do that. And again, our team will get to having a conversation with you about whether we can help you to move more quickly, make less mistakes. I've been Todd Cameron. Have an awesome day. Let me stop my share, and then let me stop that. Bye.